Places, please. Quiet down. And here we go. And roll camera.
Okay, hello everyone, David here, and we are talking today about the Ready.Aim.Fire Pro indicator. So we'll spend a little bit of time walking through what this is and how to use it. Our agenda is first to introduce it, and Ready.Aim.Fire Pro is a trigger indicator. That's its purpose, and we'll talk about what that means. We'll talk about how to read the various elements of the Ready.Aim.Fire Pro, talk about the various ways to use it in trades, and then, of course, where you can get your hands on it. So with those as the general topics that we're going to cover, let's go ahead and jump right in. Let me bring up some charts. All right, and this is Thinkorswim. Ready.Aim.Fire Pro is available on Thinkorswim, TradeStation, TradingView. I've got it for MotiveWave, which is the platform I use for my Elliott Wave analysis, and on Tastyworks. And as I mentioned, Ready.Aim.Fire Pro is a trigger indicator. Now, what that means is I look for it as a signal to trigger an entry into a trade and sometimes an exit as well. As many folks here are fond of saying, setup plus trigger equals trade, right? That means you have to have a setup first, and we'll talk about what those are, right? And then the trigger is what gets you in, and the lack of a trigger doesn't get you in. It's a very specific tool in the toolbox, right? So I never look at the triggers when I don't have a setup. Just like any any other sort of tool, a hammer, a saw, whatever, right? You use them for a very specific purpose. And so we'll dig into it, right? This is Ready.Aim.Fire Pro down here. Let me highlight it here for you, right? Right in here. And I've got it here on a daily chart of the S&P 500. And one thing that you might notice is there are a lot of arrows everywhere, right? And I don't care so much about all the arrows, again, unless I have a very specific setup. And so while we'll talk about that in a little bit, let's talk about what all the elements of this indicator are. First of all, we've got a magenta oscillator line here that you see wiggling around, right? You may be familiar with a lot of other oscillators, stochastics, RSI, MACD, awesome oscillator. There are a ton of them. And Ready.Aim.Fire Pro, the oscillator in it, has some very specific characteristics, right? It's designed as a trigger, and this particular trigger, right, the oscillator portion of this trigger is designed to find reversals. That is, we're looking for spots where after a move up, right, the S&P might revert to turning back down. And so when we're looking to do that, right, the portions of the oscillator that we care about are going to be when we're overbought for turns back down, that is areas above this blue line, and areas where we're oversold, that is from below this lower blue line. And so one of the things that's special about Ready.Aim.Fire is that the oscillator in here goes through a mathematical transformation That's kind of like the focus on a camera, right? So if you've got a camera and you want to focus on things that are nearer to you, you adjust the focus to near, right? When you want more clarity for things that are far away, you adjust the focus for far away. And of course, that comes at some expense, right? If you focus on something near with your camera, things further away are more blurry. So the focus in Ready.Aim.Fire Pro is at the extremes. It's at the edges. It's at the area outside of the overbought line and outside of the oversold line. And what that does is it focuses the indicator on the action near extremes where you get reversals from, at the expense of clarity here in the middle. And so that serves to make this a better tool for finding out what's going on at the edges, right? Which is where reversals come from, and therefore the action that we want to be particularly focused on. So the oscillator itself is crisper at the edges than it is through the middle. And all the arrows do is they identify spots where we get turns in the oscillator. So if the oscillator turns down here, we get a down arrow. If it turns back up, we get an up arrow. If it turns back down, we get a down arrow. Now, we're going to be interested in very specific arrows, and we'll talk about those in a bit. Sometimes, right, it wiggles around before it turns, right? It turns down, it turns back up, it turns back down, it turns back up, it turns back down. And sometimes we will see that behavior when the oscillator is wiggling around a little bit. But when it commits to a move and comes back below the overbought line, that is sometimes a more compelling signal, right? If you want to be patient and wait for that to happen. So the first element we've covered, right, the oscillator and the arrows, and we'll put this all together in a bit, but you can also see that there are shaded areas in the region between the overbought and the oversold lines, right? We've got dark red here and brighter red and dark green and brighter green. This is all going to look a little bit different depending on your platform, right? Different platforms that Ready.Aim.Fire Pro is available on have different ways to draw things in indicators, and we make use of whatever's available on the platform to show it. But here on Thinkorswim, right, price can go through several stages, right? It can go through ready, right, and a dark red ready just says, hey, start to look for a turn back down, right? Price has gotten a little bit stretched to the upside. And then it goes to aim, a brighter red, right? And that means get even more ready for a selling opportunity. The opposite for buying opportunities. Bright green ready, dark green ready, bright green aim. In TOS, we actually have lines that have the words ready and aim. We don't have that on the other platforms, but it makes it even clearer than just the colors, what's going on. So the ideal sell signal, right, is one where you get a ready and then an aim, and then at the same time, subsequent to the aim for a sell, you've got the oscillator above the overbought line, and then from overbought you get a turn back down in the oscillator, showing that it's turning back down. The opposite for a buy, right? First you get a ready, and then you get an aim, and then a turn back up. And you can see that we started to get these from a sell near the high, right? A buy right here, up off of last week's, or sorry, not last week's, off of the August 18th low. And those were some good signals, but we'll get to that when we get to how to trade with the indicator, but just how to interpret it, right? Those are the elements that we look for when we're looking for reversals. But there are additional triggers here in the Ready.Aim.Fire Pro. So some of you might use the squeeze, right? And the squeeze identifies elements of consolidation. You can see there was some consolidation here in April and May before the S&P resumed its uptrend. And if you do track the squeeze, you can see these red dots here that formed, showing that we were in sort of sideways action, squeezing with volatility coming out of the market before resuming the uptrend. Well, as usually happens, but not always, after consolidation, price usually continues the trend it was on, which since last October has been to the upside. And Ready.Aim.Fire Pro also has these pro thrust dots that indicate the propensity for the market to accelerate out of accelerate in the direction of some trend. So these are the little signals on the center line here in the indicator. Right, in toss, they're little squares. We try and make them squares as much as possible. I think they're circles on a few platforms, right? But these indicate the potential to leave a period of consolidation and return to more trending action. So you can see it was sideways here for a while. And then we got a dot saying, yep, we might be getting ready to accelerate. And another dot in here saying we might be getting ready to accelerate. And so what I generally look to, what I've found has been fairly reliable, is when you get these pro thrust dots on the center line, I just look to the most recent arrow, right? In this case, go back to this arrow right here, and it was an up arrow. And in general, I'm going to expect that the return to trend is going to be in the same direction as the most recent arrow. Now, in this case, the most recent arrow is one on the same bar as the pro thrust dot. And that, therefore, is the direction I'll take. I'm not going to go back to this down arrow here. So we've got two different types of triggers, right? One for a reversal, which is not what you get out of consolidation, right? So one is for a reversal, and the second is for the second type of trigger built in the indicator is for sort of exiting consolidation and starting to trend again, or going from non-trending to trending. So with that, right, you heard me mention that this is a trigger indicator, and you can use it with a wide range of setups, right? Setups can come in lots of flavors, and I'm not going to walk through all the possible types of setups you can use. You probably have trading setups you prefer already. If you know my work, you know I like to use Elliott Wave. You know I like to use voodoo lines. You know I like to use Fibonacci work. And so using those tools, I'll often like to come in and say, look at where Fibonacci resistance might come in. And in doing so, I might measure from swing low to swing high, right? And then project that up from a subsequent swing low. And I might do the same thing on other time frames. So this is a larger one up from the October low, but I might also measure where resistance might come in up from the March low, right? So measure from swing low to swing high. Oops, that's not where I want to go from. Let's try this again. Measure from swing low to swing high, where we finished a little Elliott wave structure, and project up from a later swing low. And you can see that I've got a cluster of Fibonacci resistance right up here. And so when I have that, when I have an identified resistance level for a turn back down, support level for a turn back up, and look, you can use Fibonacci, you can use voodoo lines, you can use quant pivots, you can use regular old day trading pivots, you can use moving averages, you can use all sorts of things, trend lines, whatever the case might be, right? And in this case, I had a spot where I was looking for the possibility of a turn back down because I had identified resistance. So even though I had a nice arrow here, right, albeit without a Ready.Aim.Fire, right, I had ready and aim and arrows back here, but not necessarily a cluster of resistance. Here, I had a setup. I had a reason to think we might turn, right? And that, therefore, has me looking for these arrows. And so when I have that combination of setup and an arrow that came on this high on the daily, that's going to give me a spot where I want to look for a turn back down. Does that make sense? Right? Just what we talked about before. Setup plus trigger equals trade. And so while and so this particular tool in my tool bag is specifically for that, triggering when I have a setup, right? I don't pull my hammer out of my bag when I don't have something that I want to bang with a nail. So a lot of times I'll hear folks say, right, well, there are too many arrows. Well, there are a lot of arrows here for a reason. They identify, right, they show up every time the oscillator wiggles. But I only care about whether the oscillator is wiggling in specific circumstance. And again, the ideal signal is going to be ready and aim, and for a sell, right, a down arrow in the overbought area, right? And then for a buy, an up arrow in the oversold area. So, so SP, yeah, my overbought and oversold levels are at 1.2 and negative 1.2. You can widen them out and reduce the number of signals. They'll be better signals if they come from further away from the center line, right? And there'll be weaker signals the closer they are. So if you want fewer buys and sells, you can adjust that. Look, you can also identify it visually without moving them around. The spot where you can get fewer signals is if you're scanning for these things. The scan, you can change the overbought and oversold as well. For me, I don't scan for these because I'm going to scan for setups and then pull this out as a tool. But there are scans available on Thinkorswim and TradeStation. Those are the only two platforms that this is on that support scanning. So those are the only ones where we have it. But there are tools and there's documentation on the website on how to scan for them. It's not something I personally do, but it's there for folks who have it available. So that's why this stood out as a signal. Now, look, could you have used this as a buy signal in here? Well, yeah. Why? Because it came right from a voodoo snow line. And if you were looking for a reversal at the snow line, then you had this signal here. and you could take advantage of it. So that's one way to use it. This was a pretty good buy signal out of consolidation in the squeeze already on the same chart, right? We had the red dots with the squeeze and then an early pro thrust right here. Or sorry, that was the later one. The earlier one was here. This one came as we were beginning to exit the squeeze, showing that we had a move up out of consolidation. But let me give you another example of how to look at these pro thrusts in crude oil, and then Marwan, yeah, we'll take a look at some day trading ideas and how to use it. But we had a few squeezes in here, right? Squeeze here in crude. Oops. Let me get my drawing tool going. Right? Nice long squeeze here in crude. And it exits with a pro thrust, triggering you in. It was a little late. And another squeeze in here. I actually got this one long. Right? Pro thrust comes in, triggers you up, and I got some crude call debits and also some outright crude futures. I've got just a little bit left, looking for a little bit more right into that voodoo fire line, which was my target. So some great ways to use that pro thrust. You don't have to use it with a squeeze, but that's one of the ways that I do really love to use it myself. But as far as reversals, let's see. Let me find a. So here we go. This is this is a chart I used for day trading. Now you can use this on. You can do exactly what I'm doing here on MotiveWave and TradeStation. The reason you can only build the chart on those two platforms, at least as far as platforms that have Ready.Aim.Fire Pro available, is this is a 2500 volume chart. That is, it starts building a new bar, right, and continues in this one bar until 2500 contracts cross the tape. Right? And then once they do, it plots the close for that bar and it starts building another bar for 2,500 contracts and then another 2,500 contracts. So in many ways, it's similar to a tick chart where a tick chart will go for a certain number of trades, and you can use this on a tick chart as well. I like the volume chart a little bit better, right? And for this particular chart, well, let's finish contrasting this with a tick, right? So a tick, I might use this on a 1500 or a 1750 tick chart. We'll look at that in a minute, which might be, right, a certain number of trades, but it doesn't discriminate whether those trades are for one contract or 5 or 10, right? And with the volume chart, it's sensitive to just the total number of contracts. So what I like to use in combination here on this particular chart for intraday signals in the ES futures, right? I want to use this Dyna range, which automatically plots support and resistance levels, right? Support in green, resistance in red. And what I'm looking for is a Ready.Aim.Fire signal that comes from right at one of the support levels for a buy and a resistance level for a sell. So I want to see the dark green and then the bright green and then an arrow. And I want to see us, right, either right at or coming up from right at a support level when we get that for a buy, right? And the same thing for a sell, right? This continued up, and you've got dark red ready and bright red aim. And the arrow comes when we're right at a resistance level for a sell for this thing to come back down. So that's one of the ways I like to use it in the futures. In stocks, look, adjusting the time frame is an important element of the Ready.Aim.Fire Pro, and there are a lot of tips on how to set the time frame right in the usage guide, which comes with the indicator. So if you do get it, you'll have a page here which will tell you how to get it, right, for the various different platforms: TradeStation, Toss, TradingView, MotiveWave, Tastyworks. Make sure, if you do already have the indicator, and I know a bunch of folks here already do, right, make sure you come down to the Ready.Aim.Fire Pro usage guide and instructions and grab that. And right, it's a pretty comprehensive PDF, which will show you everything from how to set the time frames right, what the visual interface looks like on various different platforms, different setups that I like, some stuff with the scans for the platforms that have it. Right, I don't have TradingView up right now, Travis. But let's see. Right, this right here is how it looks on TradingView. So very, very similar, right? The same transitions from ready to aim, right? Dark green and then bright green. Instead of arrows, you've got little triangles, right? Dark red to bright red, the pro thrust. So it's very, very similar. There are no arrows in the interface, so we use directional triangles, but that's really the only material difference there. And again, this is all broken out to show you what all the signals and everything look like on all the platforms, and there's a lot of useful stuff there. So we are just about done with our 30-minute quick overview. Of course, you guys know I'm here for a market overview every Thursday, so you can find me back here if you want to know, talk more about Ready.Aim.Fire Pro. This was just a quick intro. If you do want to get it, it is a paid premium indicator, and so there's a page where you can grab it on the website. I'll post the link. It's not that hard to find, but there it is. Yeah. So Andy, the pro thrust is just so what it's basically doing. Let me get an S&P 500 chart back up, right? So the first thing that I want to identify is that that we're in a period of sideways action, and I identify that with the squeeze, right? So if we're squeezing, we're likely not trending, right? Or we're at a pause in a trend. And sorry, this is crude, not S&P, right? So in the squeeze, first we get, now this one gives you a little head fake, right? Because during the squeeze, Now, the squeeze isn't over yet, but you get a little pro thrust down. And we do get some down movement since then back into the voodoo tree line, and then we get a pro thrust upward. So it's just these little squares that appear on the center line, and they, just like the squeeze is not directional. Right? So it doesn't tell you that by itself that it's heading up. All it tells you is that it looks like we're leaving a less directional phase and beginning to get more directional. So that, but if you look back to the direction of the most recent arrow from the oscillator, my experience is it usually heads that direction. So that's what we've got there in crude, right? Another example from the S&P is right. You can see where it was squeezing here late April and through a portion of May, right? And then we got these squares showing up on the center line, and those were warnings that we're getting ready to get directional again. So so if you look back to the most recent arrow before, this one right here, right, when we were trading back around this level, you can see after this day, we never ended up at this level again. We came back close to it in here, but this was still good as a level we never revisited down towards. And, you know, then from there got another thrust upwards and continued up. Yeah, and so PJ, it is, oh my gosh, I've got crude on another screen up above me, but it's the fire line is at 89.69 is roughly where I'm looking to, and within a few pennies of there, I also have 161.8% fib projection. So yeah, we're getting very close, which is why you know, I had some call spreads. I took those off yesterday. I have a little bit more. I have a few futures contracts. I peeled off more of them today. I've got one more small call spread, but yeah, I'm peeling stuff off as we get close. So we're almost there. Anyway, I hope you all found this intro useful, and as I said, I'll be back here soon. Cosmo, real quickly, your question about 5-minute chart. It depends, right? So let's talk about that. If you're looking, let's bring it up to a 5-minute chart really quickly. And this is where the setting of the timing gets important, right? If you're looking for small moves, right, then as long as they're not part of much bigger moves, it's fine, right? So you can use some buy signals, but you have to see how big the move is, right? If it's, a small pullback in an uptrend, then you can use small time frame buy signals. If you're in a large uptrend, right, I wouldn't come in here and necessarily say, well, if this has been going up for a long time, I'm not going to look at a 5-minute sell signal and think I want to sell. Right? So that's the important part of using it, is to understand what your larger time frame move is, and not to think that you want to fight it just because you're getting a 5-minute signal the other way. Right? On small time frames, it's much more useful in terms of joining the direction we've been going in. So we've been heading up since last Thursday. I'd be more inclined to intraday use these signals in here, right? Not this one or this one, right? Because we hadn't, even though we had started to see some aims, we weren't oversold in the oscillator. But once we got oversold in the oscillator and had a ready and aim, boom, that's where we turned up from here intraday today. Right? So hopefully y'all found that useful. And as I mentioned here in the Essentials room, I'm here every Thursday at what I think 10:30 Central, 11:30 Central. I can't remember off the top of my head, but every Thursday morning for a whole hour, we go through the Elliott Wave outlook and everything else going on in the market. So thanks for spending a little bit of time with me, and I will see you all again soon.
Is it all over, Rock?
I guess so.